I heard a quote recently by Rich Buffalo. Life is like a book with many different chapters. Some tell tragedy, others of triumph. Some chapters are dull and ordinary, others intense and exciting. The key to success in life is to never stop on a difficult page, to never quit on a tough chapter. Champions have the courage to keep turning the pages because they know a better chapter lies ahead. In retrospect, I can easily pick out the most difficult chapter in my life. It was about 4 years ago. I would like to think that every chapter is defined by a year. It starts out with a New Year's resolution, kisses, and fresh starts, and it ends all wrapped up in a Christmas bow. I suppose, looking back, that this would be spread out over 2 chapters then, as it started in the end of one year and the beginning of the next. It was not a good time for me. My grandmother passed away, and that's what most of this is centered around. I remember when my mom got the phone call. She had picked me up from cheerleading practice that night at high school, and she had been late, as she usually was. She was just a busy woman, but I felt very slighted by the fact that she was late. It really bothered me, but I didn't know how to express it. So, I argued with her. That was my only way that I knew how to do it. We were fighting, and her phone rang, and it was her brother. It was really weird because her brother always goes to bed around 8 o'clock, and this was between 8:30 and 9. She picked up the phone, and all that I could hear was her side of the conversation. "What? Are you serious? I'll be right there." She hung up the phone and I looked at her, thinking the worst thing that it could have been was that his cow got out or something. Maybe his truck wouldn't start, something like that. He needed help with something and she could go help him. So I asked her and I said, "What's going on? What does he need?" And I remember she turned around at the stoplight to talk to me because I was in the back seat. And she looked at me and she said, "Your grandmother fell at the nursing home and it's not good. I'm going to go see her at the hospital. I'll bring you home and then I'll go." I instantly said, "No way, Jose. If that's my grandmother, I'm going with you." She was a very important person in my life and I want to be there for her. My mom and I argued a bit about this, but eventually I was able to tag along. We headed down to Catholic Medical Center where she was admitted, and everybody, including the DPOA, had already made the decision that she didn't need the hip surgery. It wasn't worth the risk. She was 83 years old, she had Alzheimer's, she didn't remember anybody, she didn't remember how to eat, she didn't remember how to exist, and she was not happy. Everybody had made the decision to make her as comfortable as possible. Now I thought that this was a decision you made when somebody had quite a bit of time left so that you had time to accept it, to get all the things in order that you need, and to really prepare. Well, that's not quite how it went. She moved up to Concord Hospital the next day to wait for a placement or a bed in the hospice house connected to that hospital. She just didn't do well. She went really downhill from there. On the day in Concord Hospital, her pneumonia really started to show up from laying flat and not being able to get the fluid out of her lungs. She just didn't do well. She was asleep more than she was awake. She moved over to the hospice house and she really didn't have that much time there. I was there from morning till night. My mom stayed overnight and I stayed at an aunt's house. And I remember the morning when I woke up and my mom was sitting on the edge of my bed. My only question for her was, "Why are you here? I thought you were staying with Grammy." It didn't strike me that Grammy would have passed away that quickly. She looked at me and she said, "Grammy passed at 3:30 this morning." And I said, "Okay." I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't know what to do. All I did was say, "Okay." I was very concerned about not having any black clothes to wear to the funeral, so we went shopping right away. And we went through all the motions. I really didn't break down or react until the wake. She had an open casket wake, and seeing her in there really confirmed to me that she had passed away and that this was really how it was happening. It was a lot to handle, especially all at once, not having let any emotions out at that point. I continued going through the motions, and life went on as it does when somebody important passes away. The pages kept turning. The chapter concluded at Christmas. Life moved on. It still wasn't the same. I had her looking over my shoulder, but I really wanted to go visit her. I wanted to go talk to her. I wanted her to be there for me, even if she didn't remember who I was. She had a moment of clarity, and I've been finding a lot of comfort in that, even now, 4 years later. She looked at me at one point on her first day in the hospital, and she said, "I love you, little firecracker." That was her nickname for me because I was born on the 4th of July, She hasn't called me that in a good 4 or 5 years because she didn't know who I was. And I find a lot of comfort in knowing that she knows that I was there for her, and she knows that, I had visited her and that I wasn't leaving her. It's very important for me that she knew that I was there. Fast forward a few months, and we're into the next year, or the next chapter. I just kept on reading, and I don't know how I did. My uncle was admitted to the hospital in February, and he doesn't go to the doctor unless it's absolutely necessary. Unless somebody says this is life or death, you will not see him anywhere near a doctor. He has a farm, he's very backwoods, he's very country, he's very, don't anyone come near me, I'll fix it myself. Having him admitted to the hospital alone is a very serious thing. When we got there, I found out that he had had a heart attack. I felt like my book was falling apart at the seams. My world was crumbling around me. The two most influential people in my life, as far as I could understand, were dead or dying, and I didn't know how to handle it. We went home that night, and I asked my mom to bring me to the hospital. I didn't trust myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I didn't want to live without those two people. I stayed in the hospital overnight, and my mom was really upset, and in retrospect, I feel very selfish, because my mom had just lost her mother, not her grandmother, somebody who was even more important to her than she was to me. Her very own brother was in the hospital, and now her daughter is asking to be brought to the hospital. In retrospect, I wish that I had figured things out on my own and not needed this trip, and not needed this scare for her. After that, I got a counselor and I started actually talking about my emotions instead of just keeping them all inside, and it's a lot easier to deal with that way. I've kept turning the pages, I've kept reading my book, I've kept going on chapter to chapter, and each chapter has been better than the last. I'm very glad that I continued reading my book, and I really hope that everyone does the same when they hit their difficult chapter.